Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. This is Lori Smith on Blog Talk Radio. It is 9:30 p.m. here in Calgary, Alberta, Monday night, October the 11th, Thanksgiving here in Canada, and Columbus Day in the United States. And hope everybody's had a great weekend. I know it's been just a really nice weekend for myself, and I'm wishing that for everybody else. I'm having a coffee and just looking at this material. I wanted to continue talking about the WHO, the World Health Organization's Mental Health Day, which was yesterday, October the 10th, 2010. And I actually did a show. It was about what was it? An hour long? I think it was an hour long show on this actual PDF. And so it's looking at, it's really what they wanted to focus on this year was the link between and the relationship between chronic illness and mental health, right? People who are chronically ill, physically chronically ill, and the link between mental illness because of it or is a direct result, or whether or not maybe they were mentally ill and then became chronically ill, and sort of the relationship between that. And I just think it's such an important thing to look at because so many people, as you look through this topic, and I hope you will go to this website, have, probably can relate to this, might know somebody who's been through this, probably experienced this. It's a worldwide issue. And the WHO, the World Health Organization, really is looking to bring about, the programs necessary to sort of bridge this gap here between people who are suffering with chronic illnesses that are not getting help with their mental issues, the mental illness because of the chronic illness, and also around the world. Obviously, there's so many problems with healthcare. North America, this is the place to be, but I know there's other countries around the world that have great healthcare programs too, and but it's still an issue even in these countries. To how do we help people to be able to access to get the help that they need for the mental issues as well as treating this chronic illness that they might have. So many times they'll treat the chronic illness, but the mental stuff behind it is not treated, and so the illness it just kind of compounds, and it can get worse if they don't get help. If people don't get help, right? And I witnessed this myself. It kind of applies directly to me, and also to a lot of people that I've known in my lifetime. So when they say that it's really a worldwide issue, it really is. So many people have dealt with this stuff, and quite often within our families, we might know somebody who's possibly had cancer and then had depression, or maybe they had a chronic illness like some sort of disease, and then we're fighting anxiety issues and always uptight and PTSD or whatever, because of the illness. And also sometimes people have these illnesses like depression and post-traumatic stress disorder that actually manifest in the body, and they become chronically ill really because of that. You know what I mean? So it's such a related issue, and I think this article is really well worth bringing out here. So this is Child Abuse Prevention and Human Rights Abuse Prevention is Up to Us. We're on for 30 minutes, about 26 minutes here, and we'll be talking about this tonight. And I'm not a professional counselor or therapist or doctor or anything like that. I'm just a private citizen paying to do my own shows, but I'm searching and looking for information all the time because I research, study. I'm in between courses. I can't afford to go. It's been over a year now. I've not been able to afford to go back to take my courses in international community development, youth justice, and it really was working on a degree, but I just can't afford to go right now. So I'm still studying. I hope to be able to test in and test out, actually. That's what my plan and my goal is, to be able to, without having to go and take the courses, I just want to test out, because with the knowledge and the background that I have, I probably could test out in a lot of it. So that's the thing. It's, I just continually study. So that's what I'm doing. And I thought, well, hey, while I'm doing this, I may as well bring it out to people and talk about it, since I'm doing Blog Talk Radio anyway. Whatever I find that I think is very helpful or useful for other people, and as well as myself, right? I'm a survivor of child abuse, and I'm always looking for information. I'm doing a lot of soul searching all the time and looking into my own situation. So I find this information useful for myself as well. And so, hopefully people are getting something out of it. That's what I hope. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. I appreciate it. So you have to listen at your own discretion to all of my shows. I'm always talking about abuse, and I'm always talking about some situations that might make people uncomfortable. So you have to listen at your own discretion when you're listening to any kind of shows like this. And, you have to know what's good for you to listen to, and turn the show off if it's making you uncomfortable, right? You would not be hurting my feelings at all. And if you're a young person under the age of 18, I just ask that you have permission to listen to my shows. There's a lot of adult content on my shows. And, I'm the Canada Regional Director for Dreamcatchers for Abused Children, and we're fighting to keep children alive. We're fighting to save children's lives, really. That's what we're doing every day. And so you'd be doing yourself a favor and myself a favor if you'd get permission to listen to my shows, right? Or any shows like this, or being in any chat room. Do you want to keep yourself safe? There are a lot of sick people out there, and they will use any means they can to get a hold of you. Living in fear will not help you. Getting the education will. Just start typing into your browser internet safety, online safety for children, different things like that. How do I stay safe online, right? Anything like that. Type that into your browser, and it will bring up all kinds of great websites with lots and lots of good information on there on how to keep yourself safe when you're online. So, and parents can do this as well, and you can help protect your family and your children, right? It's so important. So we'll get right into this article. World Federation, this is the World Health Organization, the WHO, the WFMH, World Federation for Mental Health. And they had a mental health day last year in 2009 as well. And this one was October 10th, 2010. And they said that really what it was all about was promoting an international forum, the need for inclusion of mental health in the emergent and growing emphasis being given to non-communicable diseases. Mental health is intimately tied to the Millennium Development Goals. And as these goals are reformulated, they said here, we are trying to ensure that mental health is prominently represented. The burden of mental illnesses is well documented. And this year we are underlining the intimate and bidirectional relationship between mental illnesses and chronic physical illnesses, including diabetes, cancer, heart disease, respiratory diseases, and obesity. So I think this is a great article, and I think this is such a great PDF, and you can find it by going to www.wfmh.org/2010-2010 world_mental_health_day.htm. And this is just such a great PDF. I really think it's awesome. We left off, maybe just forget how many pages we got into. It wasn't that many. It's 65 pages long, this PDF, but we probably won't cover the whole thing. I just wanted to take a look at it briefly because the issues of mental health, I mean, so many people suffer with mental health issues, and that could be anything from just stress, stress-related stuff like post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety issues, depression. So many people suffer with depression and different, severities of depression, whether it's just a mild form of depression, which is probably what I suffer from growing up abused. Maybe mine's more medium or something, but I don't have the full-on manic depression, like the actual mental disorder of depression, I don't think, because I'm able to pull myself out of depressed states. I don't get so depressed that I can't go to work. I've been so blessed to be able to maintain a job and keep going all the time. But my mom was manic depressive, and my dad suffers from depression as well. So, and some of my family members did too. One of my brothers was also manic depressive, and he killed himself. He committed suicide when he was 33. But he was a drug addict. He was a cocaine addict, but I don't really think that was it. That wasn't the issue. It was all the underlying other issues that he had, which was manic depression and just being really depressed and down all the time. And, he was suffering and he didn't get any help, and he had opportunities to get help, but he didn't get the help that he needed and killed himself at the age of 33. And that's horrible. And then my other brother died of a drug overdose, and he had all kinds of problems. Who knows what was really wrong with him, but he had done so many drugs and had so many overdoses that his brain was just kind of wrecked from it, and he never really did come back from those overdoses when he went into a coma. And he did that a few times, and he was never really quite the same each time that he would do that. And then finally he died of a drug overdose at the age of 43 in a shelter, in a homeless shelter. So mental illness runs in my family, you know what I mean? And it's something that, has hit my family hard. Not only that, but there was just, people that listen to my other shows, the One Child Abuse Survivor to Another, and mainly on this show, I talk a lot about child abuse issues and my own, my own life story of how I grew up and how my parents were and what they did. It was all kind of, I would say, linked to mental illness. Both of my parents really needed help and didn't get any help. And then the children, of course, we grew up, we needed help, didn't get any help. And so we're just kind of a prime example of what can happen to people if you don't get any help, right? And so that's why I'm doing these shows, because the shame does not belong to me. The shame belongs to my abusers. So I don't mind talking about this stuff. But a lot of people have a hard time talking about this stuff, and it can make people really uncomfortable. So, that's why I always do a discretionary warning in the beginning to let people know that, they should listen at their own discretion, right? So I think we left off in this article about page 10. I'm pretty sure it's right around page 10. And the first part of this article, they're just going through the introduction and everything in this PDF. And we looked at the whole chronic physical illnesses and mental disorders fact sheets, overviews, and action steps. We went through that. And the heart disease and depression, we looked at that. That's page 7. And we talked about that on my last show. And then cardiovascular disease and mental illness, we talked about that. And the next portion was depression, I'm pretty sure. That's what I wanted to take a look at tonight. And diabetes and depression. Here's what they have to say about that. They say, estimates indicate that 1 in 4 persons with diabetes suffers from depressive symptoms. The odds of developing depression and the rate of depression are doubled for people who have diabetes. So that's horrible, because, I know people who suffer with diabetes, all the different, I don't know exactly what you call them, but the different stages, like the different severities of diabetes, and whether it's type this or type that, right? And that's horrible. I mean, my God, that's got to be a horrible disease. I can't imagine living with diabetes. I don't have diabetes, and diabetes doesn't really run in my family. We had my mom had old age diabetes, and that's that diabetes that kind of comes on with the onset of becoming older, more aged, older in years. And one of my brothers has been diagnosed with diabetes, but I think it's because he's old now. He's in his 60s. I mean, I shouldn't say he's old, but he's getting up there. He's in his 60s, or he just turned 60, and he just recently became diagnosed with this old age type diabetes, right? But nobody in my family, had to do the diabetes testing every day and this sort of thing. I actually know a lot of people who have diabetes and have to test themselves, throughout the day for their blood sugar levels and whatnot, or whatever they're testing for. And, it's got to be a disease that's very scary for people to live with, especially young people when they have that real serious, deadly form of diabetes. I knew a lady who got a blister on her ankle. She had major diabetes, and she got a blister on her ankle, and it killed her. She didn't go get help for it right away, and the blister would not heal, and then they had to cut her leg off, and eventually she just died from it, right, within about a month. I mean, she went really fast. And so, I mean, I watched this happen to this poor woman that I knew for years, and horrible, absolutely horrible. I can't imagine what it would be like. So I can imagine depression. Depression kind of comes around with all illnesses. I was talking a lot about this the other day on my show, the fact that my sweetheart is terminally ill. And, depression, he could have easily let that take him over, and he was diagnosed almost 10 years ago, and they gave him 2 to 5 years to live without a liver transplant. They said if you don't get a liver transplant, you might have 2 years, you might have 5 years, we don't know. And 10 years later, he's still here, but, it's because he does not, he's mentally stable enough to not allow himself to get depressed. Once in a while, he does have a bad day. Maybe a few times throughout the year, he'll have a day where he's just kind of down and just kind of, crying or whatever, because he knows that he's terminally ill. But he doesn't let it get to him, and I think it's just because he's mentally grounded. He is, and he's very thankful for that. He's been blessed with a good sense of who he is, and he doesn't have any of these other mental illnesses that would cause him to be down all the time or just want to die or whatever. Whereas my mom was sick all the time and physically ill with all these different things. I did talk a lot about that on my last show. You can pick that up if you want to. I did that show yesterday morning. That's right. It was an hour-long show, or 2 hours. I can't remember. But anyway, the whole issue is, my mom was very sick physically as well, but she was always saying that she wished she would just die. She was so depressed that she just wanted to die. She was manic depressive, and that's the most serious form of depression. And, people who are manic depressive quite often, if they don't get help, are suicidal, or they have a lot of suicidal thoughts and tendencies and whatnot. And, my mom was always talking about killing herself. Now, she never went through it with it, but she was always on the verge of committing suicide every day. It was just like the days were just too hard for her to get through. And I can imagine anybody who's very sick, that this could happen to them, and that's why it's so important for people to know to get help, right, and not allow this type of stuff to ruin your life. It's bad enough that a person has a disease that they have to live with and that they're fighting to stay alive with, cancer and whatnot. But then when you add depression in there, it's hard to fight that. It's hard to fight to stay alive when you're depressed and you're just thinking, oh, I'm just going to die, and the worst stuff comes through your mind, right? And what's going to happen to my family, and how are my kids going to handle this, and will my kids be looked after? This is so much behind it, and so many people suffer with this. So it says based on depression increases the risk of mortality in people with diabetes by 30%. This is what they've written here. 30%. That's how much of an increase there is with people if they have depression because living with diabetes, right? So that's horrible. Based on global prevalence estimates of diabetes done in the year 2000, 43 million people with diabetes have symptoms of depression, and that was 10 years ago when they did that study. So you think about possibly there could be more, but 43 million people with diabetes have symptoms of depression. That's crazy. Now they're going on global information, right? It says the economic burden of diabetes alone is significant. When depression is present with diabetes, there is an additional increase in healthcare costs by 50 to 75%. And I can imagine that's probably the case with all the different diseases, whether it's cancer or or congenital heart disease and whatnot. Anytime there's depression involved, then they're going to have to treat that as well. And if they don't, then the person doesn't stand a very good chance of surviving, right? People who have both diabetes and depression have more severe symptoms of both diseases, higher rates of work disability, and use more medical services than those who have diabetes alone. So yeah, if a person has one of these diseases or diabetes, for instance, like they're talking here, and they're managing it well as far as their emotional and mental, feelings on the whole thing, they're dealing with the disease, but they have support. And so, people are there to rally around them and to help them when they're feeling down, and so they don't ever get severely depressed, right? You can imagine that their lives would be so much better, even with the disease. They would have the support, and they would be able to still enjoy life, right? But you can imagine people who have these diseases who are possibly older, or maybe they're just so sick that they can't really look after themselves. And then if there's no one there for them, like a family member or friend or somebody who they relate to, who really can help them out, they can get really depressed, and then their chances of survival I just think are so much less. They said the study suggests that depression increases the risk of developing type 2 diabetes by more than 20% in young adults. So see, this is the link between, I think this is why this PDF is very important for people to check it out, because a lot of times people just think that depression and PTSD and all this stuff that we might be dealing with in our daily lives at any point in our life, right? Any one of us could succumb to depression or post-traumatic stress disorder or any of these type of things. And, they've done enough studies now over the last few years to know that the direct link between these, depression and post-traumatic stress disorder and what it does to the body. So they're saying here that studies suggest that depression increases the risk of developing type 2 diabetes by more than 20% in young adults. So somebody may not even, possibly wouldn't even get diabetes, but yet if they have depression, at a young age, it can increase the risk of developing this type 2 diabetes. That's crazy. When you think about what the emotions and what these things like depression or post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, will do to the body, it's very, very damaging. And that's why I like to cover a lot of this material on my shows, because, you look back at people that you might have known, and you can just see what it does to somebody. It's very hard on the body, and stress and whatnot, right? So I try to live my life pretty much stress-free if I can, as much as possible. And everybody's got stress. We all have stress. There's not one person that people say, oh, I wish I was that person, I'd have such a good life. And, that's just, there's no sense in even thinking like that, because it makes no difference how much money you have or what side of the tracks you were born on or anything like that. Poor people can be happy too. There's lots of poor people that are very happy. And there's lots of rich people that are very unhappy. And there's lots of poor people that are totally free from any kind of mental disorders. They're just normal people having a great life. And then there's lots of rich people who have all kinds of psychosis and mental disease or diseases, right? So there's no such thing as a person on this planet that doesn't have some stress at some point in their lifetime, something that would come up. And I think it's very rare. Once in a while you might see somebody who lived on a farm somewhere in the middle of, like I saw one time I saw this thing on TV about this old Italian lady who lived on a farm or something in France, or it was either France or Italy or somewhere over there in Western Europe, and she had lived such a stress-free life. She was almost she was one of the oldest people on the planet. She was like 110 years old or something. She said she had never had a day of stress in her life. She just grew up in this area and she just lived her life and there was no stress and she just had such a good life, and so that's rare. How many people actually get to live like that? You think about that. That's very rare. And I'm sure there's people on the planet that experience this no stress life, right? But it's not everybody. And there's a whole lot of people out there who are living very stressful lives, and for whatever reason, some very sad lives, you know what I mean? And so more of us are affected by this than not affected by this, right? It says depression can lead to poor lifestyle decisions such as unhealthy eating, less exercise, smoking, alcohol abuse, and weight gain. All these are risk factors for diabetes and make it more difficult to control sugar levels. And this could be something serious for me too, because I don't eat right, I don't exercise, I smoke cigarettes, I don't drink. I might have like 2 or 3 drinks a year. I'm just not a big drinker. I don't allow myself to drink is why. And weight gain is a huge issue for me because, where I don't drink and do illegal drugs, I eat tons of food and I eat whatever I want and I smoke too many cigarettes and I don't exercise. So weight is a problem for me and all kinds of stuff like that. Very well could be because of the situation that I'm in. See, so all of this stuff there's no shame in it. It's the fact that, things in people's lives can become too much. And so they reach for the sugar, they reach for the donut, they reach for the bag of chips. I reach for a cigarette, and the chips and the donuts, right? It's like it's because I'm feeding something to try to comfort myself, right? And I totally recognize it. And I think that's the important thing if we're going to help ourselves, if we're going to be able to allow ourselves to get help, the best thing we can do is be honest with ourselves, first of all, and really take a good look at why we're doing what we're doing. That's what I've always actually been able to do that because I always was wondering why my parents were doing what they were doing. And so I was always trying to take a look at what the scene was going on in my home and why things were happening the way they were. Maybe just because I'm an inquisitive person. I don't know. I didn't think I was that nosy, but I'm always kind of interested to see what's making people tick, why people are doing what they're doing. Because, I've just always been interested in people and what's going on with their minds. Probably because I was trying to figure my dad out more than anything because he's mentally ill and schizophrenic, and he was always hearing the devil, and he was always saying that, the devil wanted him to kill us, and that God would be pleased if my dad would kill us, right? So there was a lot of dysfunction and a lot of mental psychological abuse in my home because my dad was mentally ill. So I think that I was always kind of wondering what was going on in his mind and why he would be behaving the way that he was and these types of things. So I've always been like this, and so it always has made me aware of my own situation, right, of why I'm doing what I'm doing, why I do the things that I do. And I know why I'm doing them. It's a matter of how to stop, right, and how to get control of it. That's the whole thing. I was able to get off drugs because I wanted to. Bad enough that I said, hey, no more drugs. And this was when I was 21 years old, so that's like 23, 24 years ago. But the thing is it's something I fight with all the time. Because if it's not illegal drugs, then it's something else. It's an addiction, right? I have the problem with addiction. And addiction just runs in my family. My brothers were addicted to drugs. My mom was addicted to cigarettes and coffee, and she wasn't really she wasn't a drinker, I don't think. She had a few drinks during the year, but I don't think she was a big drinker. I just can't remember. I was talking about that on my show actually this morning because I'm just not sure. I don't think she was like an alcoholic. But depression really can lead to some seriously unhealthy choices that we might make because of depression. And I recognize this in myself, right? And we have to, if we want to have a good, healthy life, boy, we got to start. We have to get on it. And it's, people can tell you that all. As a matter of fact, I get offended when people tell me, oh, well, you need to do this or you need to do that, because I already know that. It's not that I don't know that. It's a matter of talking myself into it. So I'm busy working on trying to talk myself into it, right? I'm not necessarily going to listen to what somebody else says or a doctor, but I'm really trying to talk myself into it, to want to change the way I feel about things and to be healthier, right? Because we don't want to end up with these terrible diseases like they're talking about here. For instance, the cardiovascular problems, the congenital heart disease, that runs in my family big time. So does cancer. Doesn't run all that much in my family, but so many people suffer with cancer and end up with that terrible disease. And heart disease, that's another big one that runs in my family, see. So I'm trying to convince myself to be healthy, but it's hard because I was never shown how to do it. So mentally, I was never given this mental picture of, hey, we should try to be healthy as a family, because my family was so unhealthy, right? They were mentally unhealthy as well as physically unhealthy. So just horrible. So the interaction between diabetes and depression is not well understood. However, whether a cause or an effect, the combination of diabetes and depression can be deadly. Interactions between diabetes and depression make each illness more difficult to control. So that's just it. Anytime you have somebody who's suffering with an illness and they have depression on top of it, you can imagine how fast they're going to go downhill. That's like my sweetheart. He's a perfect example, because he's been diagnosed 10 years terminally ill, and he refuses to let it get him down. And he has his moments, like I said before, but he has a routine. And I think that's what gets him through. He has a routine that he does every day. And he gets up, he does his thing, he makes sure that he keeps his place clean. We don't live together, right? He's in sort of a semi-care place. But he gets his stuff done, he stays busy. He has his favorite things he likes to watch on TV. He's big into sports, loves that kind of stuff. And so he has things that he keeps himself very busy. He doesn't keep himself overly busy because he has to sleep a lot because he's on morphine. But when he is awake and he is up and he's around, then he keeps himself occupied with things that he likes to do. And I think that's important, right? You have to have something that gets you up in the morning, something that says, hey, I got to get up because I got to do this and that. He still very much takes care of his own stuff. He pays his own bills. He goes to the stores. He can't drive, so he has to take his walker. But he's very sick, right? But he gets to the store, he does what he needs to do, right? And so he doesn't allow this disease to beat him, right? And so, it's been very helpful for me, because I haven't had to deal with this person who's so dragged out, so depressed because of this disease, really. So it's been good for me, because I haven't had to suffer along with him in this depression, trying to help him out of a depression. So it's been very awesome, for me too, to see him, that he's handling it quite well. And he is bummed out because he's dying, and he knows that, at some point we all know that eventually we have to go, but, he knows it being told that he's dying, and that, every day or every second or third day when he goes to the doctor, that, they tell him his progression and work with them on that. And, so, it's always in the back of his mind that he's dying. But he doesn't let it get him down. He's just like, hey, I'm going to live I'm just going to live. And I'm not going to worry about dying, right? I'll just die when I die. But I'm not going to sit and stress over it. And I think that's why he's still here 10 years later. Doctors have actually said he's like a miracle. He's the longest living liver patient without a liver transplant that they know of in Canada. So that's amazing. He hasn't had a transplant. He has had no real treatment. And his liver actually started to regrow and started to heal. And they couldn't believe it. They were like, "Oh my God!" He's kind of like a miracle, right? Like he's a special case. They don't really understand what happened, and I do, and I believe I totally know why. It's because we got proactive, and we changed the way we were eating. We changed the way we were. He was getting lots of sleep, lots of rest. There was no alcohol. He was really trying to look after himself. And once he got diagnosed, he thought, "Oh man!" So we changed our eating habits completely at that time when we were living together, and it really helped, right? Because it did, it saved him from further progression of the disease. But then he wasn't depressed. He wasn't sitting around all moping and complaining. He was just living life. And then, that's what the whole issue between depression and these other diseases, it's really serious. It's heavy-duty serious. So I hope you will check this website out, www.wfmh.org. And then from there, you can click on their PDF link, right? And it'll bring you right to the PDF that we're looking at here. So we'll probably finish this up on Wednesday night, I think, Wednesday, or maybe all the way through Friday. We'll see. But there's a lot more to it. We only basically got to page 12. There's a whole lot of good information here. Depression and diabetes, there's continued, and then it goes on to talk about cancer and mental illness, and I really want to talk about that because I know people who have suffered and who are like twice survivors of cancer, which is just awesome. These people, they're fighters, big time. But my sister died of cancer, so I also know people who have lost their lives to cancer. So I want to talk about this. So we'll look at this on Wednesday night and also again on Friday. So have a great night. I'll be back on tomorrow morning, One Child Abuse Survivor to another at 6 o'clock in the morning again. And if you need something, get a hold of me on Blog Talk Radio or Facebook. Just make sure you take care of yourselves, everybody. Reach out, get some help. Don't suffer in silence. And remember, you do count. You do matter. So have a great night, everybody. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.